Welcome back. Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment Minister, Barbara Creecy, has released a high-level panel report on the management, breeding, hunting, trade and handling of elephants, lions, leopards and rhinos. Creecy appointed the panel in October of 2019 in response to the number of emotive and complex conversations or conservation and sustainable use issues involving keystone species. These included lion bone trade, hunting of captive-bred lions, elephant culling, the ivory stockpile and trade in rhino horn.
It is important to stress that the recommendations are not against the hunting industry. Preventing the hunting of captive lions is in the interests of the authentic wild hunting industry and will boost the hunting economy and our international reputation and the jobs that this creates. Now that these recommendations are approved for implementation, they will result in a step change and the consequent benefits to our standing and reputation. Key to this is transforming the sector, reinvigorating the biodiversity economy through a focus on Big Five-based ecotourism and authentic hunting of wild specimens. We will be partnering with the Department of Tourism to achieve this. In addition, mechanisms to improve benefit flows to restituted communities, as well as novel approaches to land use planning, can enhance rural socio-economic development based on the wildlife economy. The reports provide specific direction as to how my department can support the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development in ensuring the welfare and well-being of wildlife, which will enhance our reputation and stimulate tourism. We will therefore be working closely with this department and other departments in this regard. In relation to enhancing our international reputation, an engagement with SADC partners and the African range states of these species and the leadership of the department, under the leadership of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, will be required. A multi-sectoral approach to implementing the recommendations is therefore imperative. In summary, I do believe that the report provides a platform for not only achieving policy clarity, but also for the development of a new deal for people and wildlife in South Africa. Implementation of the recommendations will transform the practices within the wildlife industry, enhance conservation of our environment and these species, invigorate rural economies, and empower traditional practices, leadership, and healers. Finally, implementing these recommendations will result in both protection and enhancement of South Africa's international reputation, repositioning the country as an even more competitive destination of choice for ecotourism and responsible hunting.
So for further reaction, we are joined by Fiona Miles, the director of Four Paws South Africa. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Just a note to our viewers that some of the visuals we'll be showing you in the background of lions are not of captive lions, but those that have been rescued and brought to South Africa. Yesterday they arrived from the UK. Ms. Miles, let me just first start with consultation on this panel. Were you part of it? Are you satisfied with the process thus far?
I think thus far the process has gone incredibly well, and I think we can only say that this is a great first step in seeing a transformation in the welfare of animals and wildlife in South Africa, as well as conservation. So yes, we as Four Paws part of a consultative process and submitted together with a whole coalition of organisations input into documentation.
So, as we mentioned in the introduction, that the Minister has said that this is because some of these issues are complex and very emotive. Were there areas of divergence for you as Four Paws South Africa where you felt that people are divided on some of the stickler issues, but people did eventually reach some sort of consensus, and what were those?
I think it was about taking a decisive action versus sort of a self-regulatory or sitting on the fence type action. And we're very pleased that the Minister has said that the majority consensus will be implemented, because those areas are the key and the crux, which is to basically do away with the captive breeding of lions in South Africa for commercial purposes and commercial gain, which is, as you mentioned, the emotive issues around that are the suffering that goes on in captive breeding facilities, the species inappropriate manner in which these animals are raised simply for whether it's cub petting, walking with lions, that so-called ecotourism related things, whether it's for the bone trade or for the trophy hunting of captive-bred lions. So those are emotive issues, because those are intensively captive-bred animals. Their welfare is significantly not managed and not properly monitored and regulated, and this is a huge first step for sure.
So I want to talk about the term for those who disagree, that find it an anomaly to talk about responsible hunting, for those who are against it. But please just expand on some of the implications of the recommendations, for instance, to stop captive lion breeding, captive lion tourism, including cup petting and captive lion hunting, just not necessarily on lions alone, but the other core or iconic species.
Well, when you're intensively breeding these animals in captivity for all those commercial purposes, there's lots of welfare issues that go largely unregulated. It's not possible to manage and monitor all those facilities. So it's not only, as you say, the lions, but it's the other animals as well. It goes even further into the consequence for increasing the demand of those animals, and therefore the illicit or illegal poaching of the wild population out of the wild, which is a quicker win. Whereas if there's very strict regulations and a very small amount of animals that might be taken out of the wild versus the large volume in population that have endless suffering, there's a huge amount of work. This report only got released today. There's a huge amount of work, a huge amount of consultation that will have to happen with a large body of stakeholders to figure all of this out. But at the end of the day, when we're reducing the suffering of these animals in captivity.
And just on that, was there adequate environment? Sorry to interrupt you, but just on that, was there adequate representativity? Because I know at some point there were complaints about the lack of animal welfare experts on the panel, that even though they were consulted, they were not represented.
That's true, and that's correct. I believe that animal welfare wasn't properly represented. However, looking at these recommendations initially, and as I said, at first glance, without being able to have studied the full nearly 600-page report, what I suppose is encouraging is the fact that some of the broader terms of the recommendations, not only species-specific now, but broader terms, look at the one welfare concept. And that's looking at the concept of the fact that human welfare, animal welfare, and the environmental welfare are intrinsically linked, and how we're going to focus on that. And I think that's quite a big step for us, and I think it's quite an acknowledgement.
Some of the problems were, according to critics, was the categorization of some animals, for instance, calling them farm animals, and the jurisdiction of which department it would then fall under. Talk to us about the complexities of that.
Well, 33 species were basically placed on a list without much consultation, as you just mentioned and as you know, with regards to them being categorized as farm animals, lion in particular, one of them, but alongside that cheetah and giraffe and others. And I personally believe, and I think we believe, that animals and their sentience should be recognized and not considered as farm or wild, but rather their welfare, the sentience of those animals, and what's appropriate for the species should be considered. And so, yes, it's a good first step, but all the departments related to these industries, which are currently industries, should be dealing with one another very carefully, so that all of those discussions actually take place. The human welfare aspects around this is also very important in terms of people working in these industries and working with these animals. Many also, so I would say that it extends beyond the Department of Environment and the Department of Agriculture, so to say, and goes far wider than that. And there's going to be a need for sort of the whole cross-talking in order to have this properly and effectively implemented.
So just a final question. The issue of stockpiling of ivory has also long since been a contentious issue, especially with some arguing that, we could raise money on the markets as a country with players such as China who are very much interested in this. But what is the latest on that? Are you comfortable with the resolutions or recommendations on this?
Well, at this point in time, it's from what we heard today, it seems clear that South Africa is not going to be making any proposals or putting any proposals on the table until such time as the investigations have been concluded and the recommendations of that. So I think that's a great first step as well, because obviously the outcomes of those need to be seen. And if we're proposing that, we're just going to keep igniting the demand. And what I took away from hearing what was said today is that South Africa is preparing itself to make a massive transformation, and I think that's what we need to hold on to at this point in time and support those efforts to see our conservation reputation being re-established and South Africa really being put on the map as a country that has the highest conservation standards, the highest animal welfare values and standards, and that the one welfare concept is actually put forward, and that we're not creating the demand worldwide for our natural resources, but rather that we're encouraging people to come to South Africa to enjoy our natural resources.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Fiona Miles is the director of Four Paws South Africa. Just a reminder that some of the visuals we played were from a story that we did last night of lions being rescued from the Ukraine.